Once you get a copy of the template onto your account, there's a couple things you need to do to set it up. The first one is making your resume agent page the instructions for the AI. So you'll click on Nosy, click on it again, set up instructions, use an existing page, and then you'll select your resume agent. However, there are some times when even though the page is completely visible, you won't be able to select it. That's a byproduct of Notion, and there is a workaround for that. If you need the workaround, you can go to your resume agent. Now, I've already selected it as my instruction page, but if it weren't selected yet, you can say Move to Private Pages, and at that point, you can go ahead and select it. You're also welcome to move it back to right here in the Common menu. Hopefully, by the time you get this, Notion will have fixed that issue. But if you do run into it, I just want to make sure you know how to get around it. Next, you'll go to your resume page. Go ahead and rename it. Personalize your information as is appropriate. And then we're going to start with your job history. There are two templates here. The default is where you are an employee. And the second is for self-employment, entrepreneurship, where you're taking on clients rather than being an employee. So we'll start with an employer. And for demo, I'm going to go ahead and use some of mine. Then, similarly to what you would put on a traditional resume, you put down the projects that you worked on. Unlike a traditional resume where you need to be very brief, in your Notion resume for the projects, you want to spell out in great detail what it is that you were working on. So for example, what I did may have been implementing an e-commerce platform, but what was the problem for which that was the solution? And what were the benefits to the client of that particular solution? And then go ahead and fill out that information for all of the projects for all of your employers. We're also going to specify any of the tools or technologies that we use for each project. When you start, none of the tools will be in there, so you're going to be creating them on the fly. If you have any external artifacts that are related to a particular project, you can link that in here, either by uploading documents or embedding external links. And you can do the same thing for the particular skills that were required in order for you to work on that particular project. And be sure and fill in all that information for each of the projects for each of your jobs. So let's go back to the list for job history. In the case where you're self-employed, the only difference is that you will deliberately select the self-employment template, fill in your company name, and primary details. And inside of this particular employer, you're going to list the individual clients that you had. Now you could start entering the individual projects for each client here, but I find it easier to just open up an individual client, and at that point you can treat it the same as an individual employer. At some point, when you're entering all of the tools that you've used for the various projects, they're going to start to accumulate. So you go to the Technologies table and you see the list of all of your tools. You're probably going to want to put these into some kind of functional grouping. When you create the functional groups, it will also show them to you up above so that for any functional group, you can see the list of the tools in that group that you've used. Finally, when you go to the Skills table, you'll see all the skills as well as which projects you use that particular skill. And here you have an opportunity to give more information about what that skill actually means. And if you have any certifications or credentials about it, you're welcome to put those links in here. Credly, for example. You'll notice that when we're looking at your Notion resume, it has the links for navigating your background, but it does not share the links to the rest of the job prospecting system. That's deliberate so that if you only wanted to share this page publicly, your viewers would be able to see all of your background, your history, projects, technology, skills, but they wouldn't see any of the higher level information about your job prospecting. And the databases are segmented appropriately to allow that sharing with no additional work. So to get back to the job prospecting page, we'll go to here. And at this point, it makes sense to take a look at the quality checks. Here, there are a series of views to make sure that as you are filling out all of this information, you don't have any missing information or missing links regarding all of the data that you've entered. You can try and enter it as methodically as you want, but in my own case, I found that I remembered bits and pieces as I went, and this is a way to make sure that there's no holes. The individual views here are described up above. And so here I see that all of my projects are tied to at least one employer. I've listed a series of skills, but I have yet to define what some of these skills are. And if there are particular badges or links, I haven't entered those. If there are skills that I entered but are not yet associated with projects, those would be here. This is a way where when you say there's a skill you have, you can justify that skill by showing where it was used. If there's any jobs that have missing data, those are shown here. For example, this one's missing a URL, and there's no direct projects for this particular employer, which is my self-employment company. And lastly, tools that might be missing any data. For example, Google Analytics, that has a specific URL, as do all of these other tools. When you're initially getting started with this, I recommend that you take a look at your existing resume and just translate the information into these particular tables, or you may want to look at your profile on LinkedIn if that has more information than a typical resume, and put that information in here. It is a bit more work to set up your job history in this fashion. It's also what enables AI to understand your job history, experience, the tools, the skills, and the projects that you've worked on in a way that enable the AI to extract from your history and produce a highly customized resume that increases your chances of getting past the applicant tracking system for any employer. My hope is that if you are currently looking for a job, this will be a huge asset to you, making you more successful in your job hunt. And in the event that you're looking for any help in your own Notion projects, you can find me at PrimaryGoals.com.